Oh, we're starting. Okay, great. I thought I was already going to start off on a bad foot here after yesterday with the lack of mouse fiasco, and closing down the screen too early. Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which means that there are two Joes here, although there's only one sitting down at the moment. But Mr. Rayo will be strolling in momentarily. So this will at least give me an opportunity to thank Scott Briller, the chairman. He hit Super Chat tonight from the get-go, and we appreciate that. So let me just do a little bit of quick business here. If you haven't done so already, I hate to keep beating a dead horse here, but if you have not done so already, download the free Meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app from the App Store. Okay, for those of you who are on iPhones. And you don't have to be in the New York area to use this, because it defaults to your location with regards to current conditions and local forecasts. And, of course, you get my latest posts, snowfall forecast maps from the Weather Service that update from Maine all the way down to South Carolina. I even added one for eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania. So if you're in an area that you see there's something missing and you want it added, just let me know and I'll see if I can put it on. And of course, it's on the on Google Play for those of you who have Android devices, also free. And while you're on Google Play, if you have an Android device, be sure you download Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman. So just in case mine is not working for some reason, you can use his as a backup, or if his isn't working for some reason, you can use mine as a backup. All of those are FREE. And also here, because neither of us draw a salary for this, is Joe Rayo, who has joined us for another wonderful another rendition of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And I know they're going to dwindle down to a precious few once we part company next week on a daily basis.
Right.
But I have sworn, because the public demands it, Joe, that we continue these gatherings here, and we're going to have to do it via Skype. So you got to work on that from your end.
Well, I mean, I have a Skype, I have a camera, and I have a Skype account, so you just tell me when you want to.
All right, so that's good. So this way, if I ring you, if I let you know on such and such a time, let's do this.
Yeah.
We'll try maybe and do it on a at least a once a week basis.
Whatever.
I would think, and maybe when there's storms around, we can do more.
Yes.
Does that work for you?
Well, it does. Yeah.
You sure? You seem very unenthused today.
I don't know. It's just
the
like
mood
watching.
of it all.
It's like watching in The Wizard of Oz, watching the hourglass and the sands of time are slowly dwindling down now. Or as John Daly on What's My Line.
Why so dire? Your hourglass is dwindling? What is that?
Or John Daly on What's My Line, when he was the moderator on the early versions of What's My Line. And he said 2 down, 8 to go. Well, that's basically what it's all boiling down to here at FiOS 1.
That. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, you know what? I had a 4-day week this week. Next week I'm working my first full week in almost 2 months.
Yes, I know.
And I figured next week there'll be plenty of food around, so that would be a good thing.
There's food loading up right now in the newsroom.
We'll get it later. All right, so everybody's, of course, one of the things, Joe, I really haven't talked to you since late last week, but I couldn't quite understand the hysterics that developed over this. I mean, I know it's the first one, and everybody's all excited, but there's like there just was an air of hysteria about this.
The way I look at it, it's going to be a bit of rain Thursday afternoon. The rain will mix with a few some wet snow, especially north in my zone in the Hudson Valley. Let's say north of 287, or maybe even further north,
probably
up near
north of 84.
And it'll be over with when people wake up on Friday morning, and I'm wondering whether or not people are going to look out the window expecting to see school canceled, or delays on the road. I don't think anything like that is going to happen.
One of the things I've been saying for days with regards to all of this, and I've been kind of looking at the overall broad pattern over the next week to 10 days. I was far more intrigued by the upper air for early next week, as opposed to what's going on now, because this is really, it's an Arctic front with a wave on it, and as you and I both know, at least where we are, along the coast, you take areas from southern New England down through New Jersey. In instances like this, it's basically a race. You have cold air that's coming eastward, there's Arctic air coming eastward, you've got this Arctic front with the wave on it. 9 times out of 10, the wave goes by first with the precip,
Right.
the precip shuts off, and then you just turn sharply colder behind it. And that really is, well, I actually thought that early on, there was a chance that the way that some of the models were doing it, I was actually more thinking that all of this would wind up just getting suppressed to the south, and we would get overwhelmed by all this cold air. But it turned out that in the opposite, that you had the northern part of the jet was so much stronger. So you've got this Arctic, this Arctic front and this wave, and the wave goes by first. So that really limits where the snow is going to fall. It's going to put it up in upstate New York. It's going to put it up in central and northern New England, and that's about it.
Yeah, the storm will be probably intensifying rapidly in the Gulf of Maine, 7 a.m. on Friday morning, from what we can see. And again, if you're hoping for a significant snowfall here, well, you just can't get it when the storm is up in the Gulf of Maine or heading toward Nova Scotia. As Joe just mentioned, you need to have that intensification. You need all of that dynamic happening en route into your zone, and that simply is not going to happen. It'll be past us. Not to say, of course, that we will not see any snow. We may very well in northern sections, parts of the Hudson Valley. You may see, if you're up, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, you may see some flakes of wet snow descending from the sky. It might actually stick on the top of your car or maybe on some grassy surfaces, but if you're worried about, does my snowblower work or do I need to get the snow shovels ready, I really don't think that's going to be a problem on Friday morning.
All right, so why don't we let's start things off. We're going to look at we'll start with your friend and mine, WPC. I actually set up their snow probability map here. As soon as I can get to the window, hang on a second. There we go. I set up their snow probability map.
Now, is that they have various probability like ratios, like 50 percentile and 90 percentile, and
right. So this is just this is a fairly simple, straightforward setup where I put in the probability of greater than an inch of precip, and for the 24-hour period ending 0Z on the 9th. So we're basically going out. All of this encompasses the snow,
Right.
the snow with this system. So the area I always tell people to focus on. This is the probability, by the way, of greater than. All right, hang on a second. It loves to do this to me, where it just jumps around.
well, was this the 1 inch?
Yeah, this is the 1 inch.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the probability of 1 inch. So anything in blue, starting from the darkest blue, that's a 40% chance of at least an inch. All right. That to me, that number to me always works out pretty well to where the bottom, where that edge of that 1
Right.
inch line is going to be.
Right.
And of course, you look up at the oranges in Maine and northern New Hampshire, Vermont. There's a 80% probability, so it's an almost certainty that it's going to happen there. But when you look at where the southern flank is, I mean, the brown is 5% or less, as we were just saying, Route 84,
Right.
north of Route 84. In fact, some places far north of Route 84. Right. So I feel comfortable with this. And by the way, in terms of anything sizable, if we change it to the 4-inch probability, then you have to go up to northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and most of interior Maine, except as you get down closer to the coast where there's at least a 40% probability of 4 or more. This is not a superstorm by any stretch of the imagination.
No, as I said, Friday morning, intensifying storm, Gulf of Maine. So obviously you would think that, as we see on this map here, if you want 4 or more inches of snow, you'd have to go to Maine. And note also, right along the immediate coast of Maine, hardly anything, certainly less than 4 inches expected. You have to go inland to see that 4 inch plus probability. and or up into New Brunswick, let's say, or toward Nova Scotia, that's where you're going to get the snow on Friday or Thursday night Friday, and you're not going to get it. Already the illusion. I saw one forecaster on one of the stations here in New York talking about when the typical first snowfall is, the first inch that typically falls, already like making suggestions, revving people up into a frenzy in terms of this impending snow. And as you mentioned, it looks a lot better, or the odds look a bit more significant.
I think the upper air is far more. I think the upper air is far more impressive going into the weekend and next week. We're going to get into that on the long range. I just widened out for the rest of those of you who are watching outside of the Northeast, so you could see the probabilities. There's nothing really of consequence. I changed it back to an inch here, and there's nothing really of consequence going on, at least over the next 3 days. 2 days, because this goes to Thursday. 0Z on the 9th is what? That's Friday night. I'm sorry.
Right.
So the next 3 days.
Right.
So the rest of the country really is not seeing very much at all. It's a fairly quiet pattern. Not a whole lot of storminess going on, and that we'll see what happens when we get down the road.
And we're coming off of I don't know if you saw from NOAA that October in over 230 different places, 230 cities in the East. Top 10 October, warmest October, and some places breaking their all-time record, mostly down over the Southeast.
Because they got baked to a crisp. But there was an interesting thing that I saw earlier back over the weekend. No, actually late last week, because I mentioned it on the show on at one point over the weekend, was the fact that Birmingham, Alabama, for the first time in their records, had a day in October, had a day over 100 and a day at 32. And that's never happened in the same month before.
Wow.
The other thing about October that's very interesting, that while all that was going on, so you have to ask yourself, by the way, you have the water vapor imagery up here, you have to ask yourself, well, you're coming into a time of year where there's going to be more amplitude in the overall weather pattern. So what was the extreme on the other side of the equation, which we forget, and that is Chicago getting their first inch of snow before November 1st. Mm-hmm. Their mean first snowfall day for their first inch is December 7th.
Right.
Okay. You had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 accumulating snows, I believe, in the city of Denver during the month of October. So the northern Rockies, the Plains, northern and central Rockies, that whole area there, colder than average, and also getting extremely early starts for their first snowfalls.
Right.
So that kind of explains, in a way, you get all this amplitude in the east with heat. You got the other thing going on in the west. Now, on the water vapor imagery loop, the upper air pattern is fairly clear with the way the northern part of that jet stream here is coming out of southwest Canada and just coming right across. And at the same time, you got, there's a little bit of a not too terribly strong subtropical jet here with some mid-level moisture. And we're going to be waiting there's an upper trough that's dropping southeastward, and that is really going to be the catalyst for our system for tomorrow.
Right. And, it'll be a nice day tomorrow. The only drawback, if you got used to today where temperatures across the region were flirting with 60, tomorrow it'll be about 5 or 6 or even 7 degrees cooler, in spite of the fact that we'll have a lot more in the way of sunshine. It'll be a wall-to-wall blue sky, lots of sunshine, but it's just that we're getting that cooler or chillier airflow, and that'll hold temperatures to mostly the mid and low 50s, which is not bad for this time of the year. That's typical for the early part of November. It's what's coming our way after we get past Thursday. Some very, very cold air that's building in. Friday, I said in the Hudson Valley, 40 degrees or thereabouts for a high temperature, but with winds gusting to over 20 and 30, that 40 is going to feel a lot more like 30.
Oh, it's going to be. It's going to be.
Break out the wind chill charts on Thursday.
Oh, sure. MZ Sphalerite says temperatures have been running about 10 to 15 degrees cooler than average. Fall temperatures collapsed the latter half of October in the central U.S. That's correct. Ruthless Goat, I don't know if he's on tonight, but I remember him saying back a couple of weeks ago where they basically went from straight heat to wintertime out where he was, and there was absolutely no fall. The big heavy wet snows really ruined things as far as fall color in where he is in Colorado. Here's the regular visible satellite on the GOES, and we had a little bit of shower activity today, actually on Long Island and into southeastern New England. It was a bit more than just a little bit, but that's moving out. We've got this nice dry high that's sort of in between that and the next system that's starting to drop down out of southwest Canada and into the northern plains. But it's pretty clear that there's just, we're not seeing any kind of gigantic rotations in the satellite going on. And just to go back on the snow, I meant to do this before. So here these are the Weather Service numbers, their forecast for snows here. You got a lot of areas that are just in the 1 to 2 inch range. And one of the things I picked up on, Joe, too, is the fact that they haven't even gotten around to putting winter weather advice. It's early, but they haven't done anything from the standpoint of winter weather advisories. But here you're talking about, except in the way up elevated areas in upstate New York, northern Vermont, New Hampshire, up into Maine, where there's some big numbers. Everything else here is just like, the first of the season cheap thrill.
Yeah, if there's going to be any kind of advisory for, let's say, our tri-state area, I would suspect, and this would be for northern zones especially, I would suspect that on Friday we might see one of those wind chill advisories. I don't know exactly what the criteria is, and it might even be such that it might not, when you compare it to what you have in the wintertime, it may not match up or allow for an advisory for wind chill. But considering that what we're going to experience on Friday is something we have not seen in a very long time, they still might want to consider, if not that, a special statement.
Well, I'll bring up the temperatures. Go ahead for Friday.
Yeah, I said the actual ambient air temperature is going to be around 40 in the Hudson Valley, and I think it's going to feel a lot more like upper 20s to around 30, even with sunshine during the course of the afternoon. And then it's going to be, just plain downright cold come Friday night.
I just put up the apparent temperature. Oh, come on. I love when the chart jumps around.
Technology. You think back to 40 years ago when we were doing all this by hand.
Well, here's some of the numbers. The apparent temperature at 10 a.m. on Friday. Upper 20s to around 30 near the coast, but like you look up at the Hudson Valley, you go, especially as you get up into the Catskills. I'm not sure exactly what specific towns these are, but you're talking about mid-teens, even a single digit there. So that must be one windy spot if that's the case. But definitely the impact of the wind and the temperatures here for Friday, as you point out. And in terms of the maximum temperatures on Friday behind it, we're going absolutely nowhere. Let me just make this a little smaller. That might make the map a little bit easier to use. So Wednesday and Thursday, tomorrow we're looking at temperatures mostly upper 40s and low 50s tomorrow. You're looking at maybe low to mid 50s on Thursday, but you go up north in the colder air, you can see where the snow's going to be. And then we'll go to Friday's highs, Joe. Looks like we collapse Friday morning and just basically sit upper 30s and low 40s all day.
Bitter. That's going to be the story on Friday. It's not going to be the snow. It's just going to be the cold and the extreme in terms of winds. And then the winds will die out quickly or drop off quickly. And it'll be still rather chilly, if not downright cold on Saturday. But with less wind, it won't be as harsh. And Sunday, I think we'll kick back up into the upper 40s to around 50.
But by Sunday.
By Sunday,
this is Friday morning, so you can see it's a pretty sharp front here that's coming through. So we're going to see temperatures by morning dropping down. It's above freezing on Long Island and in the New Jersey shore, but if you go just inland north and west of the big cities, it's all down in the 20s Friday morning, so temperatures are going nowhere. And this, by the way, widespread hard freeze Friday night into Saturday morning. You're talking about everybody getting down into the 20s, and areas as you go north and west of the coast, some teens showing up. So this is definitely the coldest shot of air of the season so far.
This effectively will pretty much end the growing season most everywhere. Last Friday night you may recall that we had freeze and frost advisories posted in the Hudson Valley, but not for Orange County. And one or two people pinged me, why aren't we under a freeze? Well, for Orange County, they had already assumed that the growing season had come to an end. And I think the growing season pretty well has come to an end, especially where I live. My wife on Saturday, we were growing tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, and on Saturday she just cut a whole bunch of them down, and I had to throw them into the woods, and there were so many of them that were still green. And I said, how could you do this? I mean, can't you do something about it? No, you
Well, you
can't.
can make fried green tomatoes, can't
Yeah,
you?
maybe, but, it's so sad. You get into this time of the year now, and it's like, it gets dark
Yeah.
early, and, it's...
I have my 3 avocado trees in my backyard that I got to bring inside.
Oh,
So I grew them from pits.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were into avocados.
Well, they don't produce avocados. They just make for, they just kind of look ornamental, and they're a conversation starter.
Okay,
All
all right.
someone
was a
comes
big-
over and says, I say, look at my avocado trees. And
Yeah. Who was big into avocados, he passed away some years ago, Duke Snyder, who was the famous Brooklyn Dodger.
Yes.
He when he retired, he got into avocados. So,
I love them. I eat one. I eat one a day. An avocado a day keeps the doctor away.
oh, okay.
All right. So here are your temperatures. You're all set as we go through.
Phil Rizzuto once said, a day without cannoli is not a day without sunshine.
I can understand for those who like Italian pastries because I really don't.
Yes.
Which is kind of odd since I grew up with a family of bakers, but maybe that's exactly the reason.
Yeah.
I was just surrounded by it so much. Plus, I don't really care for sugar.
Okay.
All right, so let's roll. I just wanted to point out I got to keep the WPCs. I've been getting into the habit of showing the 3-day and the 7-day QPF, and that's another thing, Joe, with coming out of this. This is. And this goes through Friday night. So even with this front going by, there's not a whole lot of precip that's being generated here. And in fact, WPC is kind of understating. And that green there is the last green before you get to the blue, the darker green. That's
Right.
1/4 to a 1/2 inch. They apparently are not really all that impressed with the amount of rain that's going to come out of this Arctic front.
Right.
Now, that's a different story across the southern plains and across the middle Mississippi Valley, or the southern part of the middle Mississippi Valley through Arkansas and into West Tennessee. So they're getting 3, 4, 5 inch rain amounts there. And also some heavier amounts up in Maine, and some of that is from tonight.
Right.
But on the whole, there's not a whole lot of precip here showing up for the next 3 days. And for the next 7 days, and now this will take us through next Tuesday, there really still isn't a whole lot of precip showing up.
Well, look at the people down again across the southern plains. They're really going to get quite a bit of moisture.
Right.
in
But
there.
now this matches up actually from the 3-day to
Right.
the 7-day. So this is coming, with the first run of precip.
Okay.
And then nothing after that. But it's overall there's a lack of major storms, so it looks like it's at least a fairly quiet, relatively quiet, even though we have this Arctic front. By the way, Scott Burler points out that November 7th in Central Park got 4 inches of snow back in, okay, I lost it on the chat here, in whatever year it was, but that's the earliest 4-inch snowfall for New York City. Anyway.
Now, we went through this last year. I forget now. I already forgot now the exact date of the snow we had in November last year.
15th.
That was the 15th?
It's November 7th, 2012.
Right.
4 inches. So last year it was...
That was the day after Election Day.
Yes.
That was the storm that came right after...
That was after Sandy. Correct.
Yeah.
And then you had... I'm sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought now. What were we talking? We were talking about the snow, 2012. Oh, last year. Last year was the 15th.
Right.
That
And-
infamous day on the 15th.
Yes.
That will go down forever in the annals of
mayor-
those who are in the salt business.
Everybody was we were on like a couple of days before that storm saying to everybody that this definitely was going to be a problem, and we knew what was going to happen on the roadways.
Right.
We were telling people it was going to be like all kinds of accidents, and then when it actually happened, What happened? They said, well, nobody told us about this. We told you about that.
I know.
And
I've
state of
given
New Jersey
I've
Governor-
given up on people. Listen, not only don't they people, not my audience, not my audience pays very close attention, but I'm amazed. They don't even read. I put up. I just put up something on my on Facebook with regards to getting, telling people that I have my free apps
Right.
and to download it. So I found back last week, I found an old National Weather Service forecast from a snowstorm from 2 years ago. So I put the image up. And then I said in the post, this is not for Thursday. And sure enough,
Right.
and then of course I took heat from it from somebody because it was deceptive. Apparently the disclaimer at the end that said this is not this is not for this storm wasn't enough. So I went and put it in at the beginning. I can't control that people don't read and don't listen. And I've known for years that people don't listen when it comes to watching on TV.
And we've pointed out on many of occasion that most, maybe not all, but most municipalities simply do not factor snow into their November budget.
Yeah, they don't budget. They don't budget for snow in November. And they didn't want to authorize overtime.
Right. So
It's that simple.
that was the reason why. And the killer was last year was not so much the amount of snow that fell. The killer was untreated roads in advance of the first period of snow.
And then coming
which go to
during
the
rush
road
hour.
And coming near the rush hour, causing all those accidents or whatever. That's what caused
Right.
the snow. Not so much that it was And I understand. I mean, I think what were we calling for, like 2, 3, 4 inches? Some places got 6 and 8. Oh, you blew the forecast.
Yeah.
No, we didn't blow the forecast. We told everybody with that particular storm that it was coming. You had to do something to the roads. Nobody did anything to the roads, and that's what caused. That's all you people out there who were on the roads trying to get home or go to work, who were on the roads for 5, 6, 7 hours. That was your reason for.
I've said many times, and I'll say it again. Your existence on this earth does not entitle you to a flake count, nor am I capable of giving one within. Some people have, will ask me for a snow forecast in terms of specifics, and after a while, I'm like, "What do you want me? Would you like a flake count?
Yes.
Would you like me to predict how much snow is going to fall on the left side of your driveway to the right of the mailbox at a 45-degree angle to the awning that sits, to the side of the 200-foot oak tree?"
This is
Enough.
Now, the quick anecdote.
And then we'll come back to the surface
I
now.
used to work for a private weather forecasting service. Among the things we used to do, we used to forecast for movie companies for
Right.
shoots. They would they would have a specific day. We're going to be out shooting. We need to know what the weather's like. There was one particular scenario where there was one of these El Nino coastal storms coming into California. The guy calls up. He says, we have to shoot tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I tell the guy, says, tomorrow morning it's going to be overcast. You're going to have moderate to heavy rain. There's going to be strong gusty winds, and temperatures are going to be abnormally chilly or whatever. I went through the whole bit. They needed fair skies. They needed
Right.
them. After I went through the whole thing, there was a long pause. He said, let me explain exactly what we need here for tomorrow. And after he goes through the whole bit, I said to myself, what do you want me to tell you? That I'm going to wave my arms and the storm is not going to be here and you're going to get your
Right.
sunshine and you're going to get your... Some people just don't...
Right, you're not quite understanding this.
Yes.
This
Yeah,
is what, it's, your forecast is cute,
Yeah.
but no, this is what we need, and you need to make this happen.
The one thing in my movie career, my quote movie career, the one thing I'm most proud of, those of you who remember, the movie Fatal Attraction?
Yes.
They needed a particular shot of a beautiful sunrise with maybe a few lacy clouds or whatever. I guess this came, if I remember correct, it was after Michael Douglas and Glenn Close got together for the first time or whatever.
Right.
It's the morning after, whatever, and they were looking for the. And I told them, look, you got a great chance tomorrow. I gave them the time of sunrise. I said they're going to have a few, lacy cirriform clouds that overlay. And they called back later on and said, that was perfect. That was the shot that we wanted.
Right.
Every time I see
But we
that
didn't have
movie-
film in the camera, so do it again. So let's go to the surface map because we watched this. We've got, it's all about cold fronts this week apparently. So
Right.
we've got this frontal boundary that's going through that brings in this next high for tomorrow, and you look at the temperatures across the Great Lakes today. Nothing particularly cold, overly cold. It's in the mid and upper 30s as you go north. It's in the upper 40s and low 50s when you head down to places like Kentucky and southern Ohio and southern Indiana. And of course, we're watching the next big high, and this is the cold air that's going to be coming down for Saturday and Friday and Saturday, because you've got this big high where temperatures right now in the teens and 20s. So it's everything. We're in this pattern, Joe, where everything's moving along,
right?
And that is bringing these shots of cold air coming down.
Right. And you said this is like the cold front city or whatever. This front moved through today. Now high pressure, little bubble of high pressure, brings us a decent day tomorrow. Then we have another front with a wave of low pressure. That's the one that everybody's going with the chances for some snowflakes here on Thursday night. That goes on by. But the one that I think is going to be most interesting in conjunction with this upper air pattern, this short wave for early next week, or as we say in the weather business, this short wave with a lot of diffluence or difluence.
Yes.
Digging, a digger, so to speak.
Well, that's kind of how I described it today,
yeah,
with the digging trough.
For Tuesday. This front actually comes through our area between midnight and dawn, Sunday night, Monday morning, gets offshore, then this upper trough starts moving in, generates some kind of a system on that offshore front, and the big question in my mind is, when will that development begin to take place?
Right.
How quickly will it develop? And how close will that old front be offshore? And if everything falls into place, and if the storm actually intensifies fast enough, and it's been going back and forth with the models.
Well, and I'm gonna get into this right now as we got the GFS up, and
this will be the 18Z GFS.
Actually, there's a problem. Apparently, it was only in last I checked through 72 hours, and I mean, it should have been long done. So there might be some kind of server problem going on. So I pulled up the 12Z. Mm-hmm. You know what? Just real fast. Let's see if the 18Z is in beyond 72. Maybe he's got it in there now. It looks like he might. Let's see how far out he has. For Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. 60, 70. Okay, good. So it is in. So we can see what kind of surprises this has for us. So you look at the upper air, and of course this is going back to this past weekend, and we've got this, the trough, we talked about it broadening out.
Right.
And now you're getting this system that's coming through tonight. I think everybody can kind of pick out the fact that, we've got this upper low in Canada, west of James Bay. There's a shortwave trough that's moved on through, and that's our front. That lifts out, and then you've got this next system. Now, this is the one for Thursday night and Friday. It's a nice little short wave, but that's all it really is.
Right.
It's just kind of moving along. But the important part of it is behind it, you've got this pretty strong northwest flow, and you also have this ridge that's built out along the west coast. And that's something we haven't seen in quite a while. You got this ridge built all the way up in through southwest Canada. So that is setting up for colder air masses to move down into the eastern part of the United States.
Right.
Now, whoops, there we go. So this lifts out, and here, of course, we're seeing all this overwhelmed cold air, the upper jet going all the way down to South Florida. So that cold is going to be felt all the way down the East Coast.
Right.
It lifts out. Now here comes another short wave for Monday. This is going to bring another round of Arctic air. This time around, you're going into Monday and Tuesday. You're going to have where the cold air gets here first,
right,
as opposed to the race between the front and the wave. And now the thing to look for or look at is energy that's dropping down from on the west side of this, which the GFS is kind of flattish with, okay, and that certainly is in the scope of possibility. That in which case you'll just wind up with some kind of weak trough that comes through here. It's cold. It's very cold next week for at least a few days, but dry, and then after that it pulls out. However, and let's bring up the European, because the European model has been quite dynamic, and I'm going to go through.
Also the Canadian model.
And the Canadian.
Right.
See, and that's the thing that's got me interested here is the fact that the European, the Canadian, both have a very similar look to it. And the European's been doing this for a couple of days, where if we watch the trough on the European, it drops right in here, Joe. When we get, this is Friday and Saturday. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. That was, by the way, the 18Z on this, on I guess on not all the maps are done. Let me bring this back. So this is the European.
Right.
And here we go. So you lift up the Friday system up into Labrador, and now you've got this really rather large, complex upper low here that's sitting in Canada. And look where the flow is coming from, all the way up. I mean, it's no wonder it's going to get cold around here.
Right.
And this is for Sunday, which is going to be announcing the next Arctic front to go by. But right in there's your digger, right there, right here. And this is where the European went, and it's been doing this, on various runs for the last several days, dropping this big cutoff low
look at that.
across the Great Lakes and sitting right near Cape Cod. By the time we get to next Thursday.
And the thing is that I've been watching, making comparisons between previous runs of the European. Now, this particular run just simply wants to show a powerhouse system, whereas previous runs suggested something along these lines, but somewhat weaker and more off to the east. So the question is this going to be verifying, or whether or not tonight or tomorrow we're going to see something a little bit less dynamic, or maybe more dynamic? Where it's still like
right.
It's still like a week away.
We are where you're going to see models dancing around all over the place. And I've been trying to make the point that I'm less concerned with the specifics and more concerned with the overall look to this. This is a very to me. When I see a trough like this extending down toward the latitude of Hawaii and a ridge that's popped up like this in the west, in the absence of something that's going to crash the ridge, and you've got this, this big upper low that's sort of controlling the flow over almost all of North America.
Right.
That sends kind of a wake-up call to me that there could be something that comes around. And then it becomes a question of how much room is there. Because if you look at the GFS, it's not that it's similar, but the GFS simply implies that there's too much energy running around and that there's no real room for something to happen.
Right.
Whereas the European, the Canadian are saying that there's going to be one good, solid shortwave digging trough. And I'll bring the Canadian upper air as well. And I mean, even here too, Joe, you can see it digging down and around right in there.
Yeah.
So that's impressive. And you're right. Now it's a question of waiting, going forward, waiting to see. And this is for next week, just in case it's not clear. This is for next week. And it's almost pointless to me to show... I'm going to bring up the surface maps, but I'll bring up the GFS, which is the one that's got the least development out of this. And there's your sneak peek at the Canadian, by the way, with that wrapped up animal in the Gulf of Maine. I mean, who knows if that's the case? But let's just go back here to the GFS. We do actually have enough of the new one. See, it's trying. I just noticed it. Let's run back. Let's run back to the GFS and start. First of all, with tonight and tomorrow. You can see that there's, the radar, I think, is going to work better here instead of the rainfall. So you can see how in the northeast it's not a whole lot in the way of snow and how quickly it shuts off when it gets to us. This is by 1 a.m. Friday morning. It's all but done except along the immediate coast. And now here comes that really cold air and that cold high, which moves out. Now you've got this Arctic front. This is Sunday evening, right in here. You got this Arctic boundary.
Right. This front is going to, as I said,
Right there.
move through sometime between midnight and dawn on early Monday morning.
Right. Big cold high up to the north coming down. So now we'll bring your front through, and it's through, and now you got as much of the high going east as you have it going south. And right there, see now the GFS on this late run, so I wouldn't, if I saw that it had something crazy, I would probably be much less bullish on it.
Right.
Because you know it's going to pull back from this.
Right.
But I think the takeaway is that you have this, you've got this frontal boundary out here, and you do have the model attempting to make something on it. And, it has it way out here. And you know how this model loves to suppress.
It's a week away. I'm
Yeah.
not going to lose any sleep over
No.
this.
For me, it's
know.
just the standpoint of just looking at the
Right.
overall pattern and seeing the potential of it. That's all I'm driving at here.
Right.
And we are going to be, by the way, regardless of whether we wind up with any kind of precip out of this or not, it's going to be cold next week. And take a look at the anomalies. This is for Wednesday, so we'll even back it up. Let's just back it up here. So you're bringing your first front through. So this is Friday and Saturday. You get your bounce on Sunday ahead of the next Arctic boundary. Look at that cold air, just everybody east of the Rockies
Pouring in.
I mean, it's just huge anomalies here of minus 10 to minus 15 or 20 down along in South Texas. And it even pushes the below normal temperatures eventually by Wednesday down into almost to South Florida.
The entire Florida peninsula is in purple here.
So we're going to be very cold, at least probably we could safely say through mid-month. And then after that, I didn't even have a chance to look at anything beyond it. But we got a lot to look at, I think, over the next 4, 5, 6 days.
And a couple of people have asked me, and I don't know if I would go along with this, and say, well, doesn't this mean if we get all the cold air out of the way now, that the winter overall is going to end up being milder or warmer than normal? And I don't really know if that's going to work. I mean, like maybe it worked on a couple of other occasions, but
yeah, my answer to that question is
you can't really tell from
small data set.
Yeah.
It's too small a data set.
Right.
A few people say, well, if it snows in November, that's not good. Actually, if you look back at the numbers, there's almost about since the majority of winters, the snowfall is below average. The November numbers, it's a small data set. I think it works out to almost 50-50 as far as above or below. But I just don't think you can gain anything. The way I always look at it is they come when they come. Okay? There's nothing there. The winters that are unrelenting from beginning to end are very rare.
Right.
Okay? They're just rare. More often than not, there's volatility. You get stretches where it's cold. You get stretches where it's warm. Sometimes you get more stretches in one direction or another. But there's always some volatility in there. So my view has always been, as someone, who's a snow lover from way back, and now I can be one again because I won't have to drive in it. They come when they come,
right.
And you play the pattern. You don't play the long range because you have no clue. Okay,
yeah.
And I'm not an analog fan, so a lot of folks, have asked me about that.
This looks like the 1947.
It's never the same. It's never exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, and
did you hear the story of the the clairvoyants? Who are the people who can tell the future? What
right? Yeah, psychics.
Right, two psychics, and the two psychics.
Our medium tonight.
They're looking at
Madame Rare.
Right. Two psychics are looking out the window at a big snowfall.
Right.
Snow's coming down to beat the band and everything. And one psychic says to the other guy, doesn't this remind you of the blizzard of 2023?
Naturally, let's put the watch up now.
Yeah.
Oh,
I should
God.
also mention on an astronomical note, because people have been pinging me on, is that the term to use for when they send you a message on Messenger or whatever, or emails? They want to know what the weather's going to be on Monday, because Monday, Joe, I'm not sure if you're aware, we're going to have an exceedingly rare event. The planet Mercury is going to come between the Earth and the Sun and actually cross in front of the Sun, and if you project the image of the Sun onto a screen, big white circle, you'll be able to see Mercury crossing the disk of the Sun as a tiny black dot. It's called a transit. It only happens about 13 times per century, and on Monday, this will happen at about 7:30 in the morning. It'll take 5.5 hours for Mercury to go across the face of the Sun, and if you miss this transit on
Right.
Monday, and say, I'll catch the next one is in the year 2049. 30 years from now. I don't know about you. I don't intend to be here. I'd like to be here 30 years from now.
I'm booked, so I really can't go anywhere.
So people are saying, is it going to be clear? I got to see this. It's another thing. So right now, at least from my viewpoint, the front comes through Sunday night, Monday morning. Maybe some lingering clouds in the morning, some sunshine in the midday hours. So I think we'll get a glimpse at least, or a chance of seeing this. And then after that, I'll just sit around and wait for 30 years for the next one to come.
Ryan Ford, do you think the fact that the GFS essentially stands alone in suppressing everything for next week means there's less confidence in that model? Well, I would respond by saying this. In this particular case that's going on for Thursday, and I actually thought that it could very well be the case, and it's turning out differently. It's sort of like being right for the wrong reason.
But you know what?
But the model does like to suppress, and it tried to suppress this thing that's coming through for Thursday, and that clearly was wrong. So you have to ask yourself whether that bias is going to be there when we go into the next system.
The best thing about the NAM model, the North American model, is it only goes out to
84 hours.
And that really should be, all the models should just go out to 84 hours, because you've got these models going out 10 days in advance, and you start watching and latching onto a scenario. But by 84 hours, of course, all of the energy and the scenario coming in close enough so that we can start really focusing on a potential situation. So maybe we should just wait until we get to 72 or 84 hours before we start blowing our minds.
Well, no, I agree. I actually enjoy this part of it a lot, if only because of the fact that I like being able to look at a pattern out in the longer term and just kind of see where the upper air is going and say, this looks like something could happen if you get, A, B, C, and D, and then so try to relate it to what's going on currently in terms of the atmosphere. In fact, then I switch to short range mode.
Right.
When we, like you said, when we get to the NAM.
You remember the good old days when we had access to the DIFAX charts that came out, and this is back in the late 70s or the 80s or whatever, and we all used to get excited when we were actually able to look at the 84-hour primitive equation, upper air, 84 hours to see what the upper air looked like. Wow, 84 hours from now. And now, of course, we can look at 15 days. It's crazy.
Now, I'll bring up the teleconnections because a lot of folks like to see the teleconnections. And remember, these are not predictive. They are coincident indicators. They're not a leading indicator. They are coincident. So it's a snapshot of what that particular model is doing at that particular point. So when we look at this tomorrow, it's going to reflect the next model run. So, but one of the things, at least it gives you kind of an idea of where the overall pressure patterns are. And what I find very interesting for next week, around the 12th, 13th, which would be next Tuesday, Wednesday, very strong Pacific North America index. The NAO, interestingly enough, which is weakly positive, it's not over, really strong positive, it's very weakly positive, actually goes to the neutral line and starts to go a little bit negative around the 13th, which is next Wednesday. And the EPO, which I have said many times, is the most important one when it comes to cold. You're looking at the EPO as being negative. So you actually have teleconnections here that are kind of telling you that the pressure pattern is set up maybe for something. Now, whether it comes out, it may not necessarily work out. And, for example, that Pacific North America index being strongly positive means ridge in the west, trough in the east, but it never tells you where in the west. Where in the west, it could be anywhere from, just west of the Rockies to off the west coast. It could be also, you have to take into account in its calculation whether there's a trough out at 160 and whether there's a trough already somewhere in the east. Right. And as far as the trough in the east is concerned, Joe, is it at 90 degrees west? Is it at 85? Is it at 80? Is it at 75 or 70? See, that makes a difference.
What you're alluding to is in some of the extreme cases we've seen, you and I have gone through over the last 40 some odd years, that we've seen cases where Boston gets destroyed with tremendous amounts of snow and New York City doesn't get a flake.
Oh, yeah.
Where the
And we've
storm
seen
just
it the other way
bombs-
around,
it
too.
just bombs out someplace out over the ocean. I remember. Now, who's our friend out there who always used to like to look over records or whatever? Scott Briller.
Well, Scott Briller, yes, the
All right,
chairman.
Scott,
The
here's
chairman is here.
Mr. Chairman. Look back in December of 1981. I think it was December the 5th of 1981. I was working again at a private forecasting service. We were doing weather for radio stations across the Northeast. And I told a number of stations in New England, Providence, Boston, oh, there's a storm, but don't worry, it's going to intensify just, far enough east so that we're not going to see much of anything, whatever. I'm still eating my words all of these years later. The damn thing just blew up. Providence, I think, got like 12 or 14 inches of snow. Boston had like almost 2 feet. New York City, nothing.
Yep.
Nothing. Maybe a couple of snowflakes out on the east end of Long Island. But that's
Not a
that's how
flake,
it goes.
not an ice pellet. That's how
That's
it goes.
how it goes sometimes. And this might be something on Tuesday, Wednesday. Like it might be one of those.
It could be, and it
things.
could be a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
David McCain, you keep asking about severe weather for Youngstown, Ohio next week. From what? The GFS is not showing severe weather. You've got an Arctic front going by for this time of year. You could probably call it bitter cold air. I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I don't know, low top convection. No, it can't.
No.
No, not in that kind of hailers, as they call it. The little.
You might be looking at some, maybe
like
some.
an
I didn't
April
look
or
at it
something.
close, but maybe some lake effect going on.
Yeah.
From off Lake Erie, but no.
Yeah.
Okay, Flavian Barlows is asking about weather for spring training in Palm Beach, Florida. The problem with that question, Fabian,
Pitchers and catchers not until 96 days from now.
there you go, and he's counting. Scott Patton, do you do your own winter forecast? No, Scott. As I've said many times here, and I know not everybody's not on every day, so I'll just repeat it. I have enough trouble with the next 10 days to 2 weeks. I have, and the long range beyond that is something that I have never, ever been able to get my head around.
If you really need to get a probability of a white Christmas or whatever, then I suggest that on Friday, every Friday, and it's been experimental now for 2 years. How much longer do they have before they finally declare that it's not experimental?
Oh, that would the experimental at 8 to 14 or the 30 day?
No, 2 to 3 week.
Oh, 33 week?
Yeah. So if you want to go to the Climate Prediction Center on Fridays after 4 o'clock, they'll give you a probability of 3 to 4 weeks out, and I guess you could check that out maybe mid or late month of November to see what they're intimating for around the Christmas time period. And here's Dr. Judith Cohen.
Yeah, I figured I'd pull this up. By the way, one of the things that's been happening here through all of this during the month of October, we have a really, really heavy snowpack across Canada and into the United States and the lower 48. So snow cover growth in Canada has been very, very strong
Right.
this fall.
We had that a couple of
And-
years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily it might translate to a colder than average winter, but it doesn't tell you for whom. So that's another part of the equation. Now, Dr. Judah Cohen follows Siberian snow cover, and of course, the month of October is the month that he watches in his research, and that has finished actually above normal. And at the level at about 2013, or just above the level of 2013. So, could you say that might lead to another winter like 13-14, which was very long, started in November, basically went right through March.
Right.
I remember that was one of the rare instances winter-wise, and I don't remember when the first snowfall was that winter, but I had nonstop snow cover from December to almost the day before the first day of spring.
Right.
So, but again, it doesn't tell us where. So,
I find it interesting on this graph here how during the 1980s into about 2000, almost every year in October it was like a below normal scenario. Then all of a sudden, boom, we started getting bumped.
well, at least for
bumped right
us, and for us, that was a stretch of years where you couldn't even count the above normal snowfall winters on one hand during those
Right.
20 years.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of those years were below average. I'm wondering if where you see this go above average, if that was 96, 90, no, it might not be. That might be 93, 94. And then it got to 95, 96 might be the one of these two that's close to average.
Right.
And then in a period from 2000 to 2020 in the New York area, a lot of the years here where you had above normal snow growth, and
Right.
you had a lot of those years here with above normal snowfall.
Right.
It's very interesting how that, in general, that's the correlation we see.
December all of a sudden has become a player in terms of snowfall. It never, when we were growing up and in our early parts of our career, December was like a throwaway month. Like, we may get an inch or two during that. But now all of a sudden, we've been seeing in past years Decembers with 4, 6, 10, 12, 18 inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
It never happened when in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Yep. Chuck Cardillo, it's easy to do a long range, just flip a coin, heads cold, snowy, tails warm and wet. Well, what happens if it's warm and snowy, like it was 2 winters ago?
Right.
There's no side of the coin. That's maybe when the coin stands on its
Stands on
head.
its end.
Okay. What are the what's the consensus on wins for Friday night, Joe? Because David Schwartz wants a fire in his fire pit.
And you need to have strong winds for that, to have a fire in your fire pit or whatever. I think we're going to have northwest winds, certainly around sustained speeds of 15 to maybe even 25 miles an hour, and some occasional stronger gusts to 40 or thereabouts. Is that strong enough for you? Combine that with an ambient air temperature of 40 degrees. It's going to be pretty damn cold out on Friday.
MZ Asphalerite said the winter of 13-14 in the Central Plains was cold and a boatload of snow. Actually, and several burials. Actually, in the Central and Northern Plains, over the last 5 to 6 years, you've had a few of those winters have been big snow producers, as my fading memory seems to seems to recall.
Well, we had some record snowfalls out there in September. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah. So this thing got a real early start this year.
Well, you know what? You know what's happening right now, Mr. Rayo? My stomach is growling.
Everybody in the newsroom is probably eating all the food that we could have gotten at
Right.
half an
So
hour ago.
I think maybe
You see what we're doing for all of you people?
we're starving for our we're starving for our art. All right, folks. So look, let's leave it here. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. We both of us I always enjoy it when you're here. So
thank you.
And since we only have a handful of days together,
Where's my $5?
well, that might come. Your palm is very dirty.
Oh yes, well,
You want your palm red?
no, because I know you get the red paint out.
That's right. So tomorrow, weather in 5 in the morning, various website posts. Tomorrow evening, we'll be back with a live stream. Maybe we'll go on again. And I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Don't forget to download the free apps, folks, on Google Play and on the App Store. The Meteorologist Joe Chaffee app and Angry Ben's app, The Angry Weatherman. They're free. Okay? Free is good. Have a nice day.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Good night, everybody.